Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whenever it is for you. This is Pastor Jim, and I'm giving you a little bit of a preamble before the sermon on Sunday because what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about sin. And sin can be a tricky subject to talk about in the best of times. It's very difficult to talk about on, I don't know, graduation Sunday, but it is an important topic for us to talk about. One of the compounding factors that makes it very difficult to talk about sin actually is the terminology we have available to us and the structures that we talk about sin in. In broad strokes, let me put it to you this way. The way that we talk about sin is boundless. It's limitless. I mean that seriously. When we talk about sin, we are talking about a thing that should be understood in many different frames, and all those frames elide into one another. We talk about sin as having a history that we'll talk about on Sunday as it goes all the way back to Genesis 2 into like a mythic prehistory. Where did the first sin come from? We know that sin is causal. So there's a causality thing that we do too. We find that one sin begets another, the same way one harm begets another, the same way one wrong begets another wrong. So we're talking now in terms of how is this all unfolding in our midst. We talk about sin as being fundamentally connected to the therapeutic understanding of it too. When people come to me and they have, especially recurring sins that they do time and time again, sins they can't stop, sins that they continue to pay the price for, that is an invitation in our community to be involved in a process of healing, of how do we break that cycle, how do we start anew, how do we have a fresh sense. This is tied in there. And lastly, we talk about sin always in conjunction with salvation, that sin is maybe even a precondition for human life, depending on how you're reading that Genesis chapter 2, a precondition for human existence, but it's not the final condition. And eschatologically, which is a fancy church word for saying, how is this all going to end up? We do not believe that the totality of our sins are going to come to consume the earth and leave this place a rotten husk that's only filled with the dead bones and the reminders of our hubris. But we believe that Jesus is leading us on a course to salvation, and that is not our death, but the death on the cross that he paid, which will signify the end of history and the fulfillment of all things for good. So that's to say, by the way, that that's the end of history and also the beginning of history. Why are we here? Why are we created? Why is God's have an intent to see us? Is answered in love. But this whole question of sin and our freedom to be able to do our sins means that the entirety of existence, ontology, this is the study of being, is also fundamentally tied in to sin. The freedom to love was also the freedom to choose not to love. And until we come to the end of things, we are stuck in that liminal in between. What I just described was how sin flows from category to category. Our speaking of sin means that we're going to have to be fluid in that same way and be able to get at all the different nuances of it. And that's something that the West and the Western tradition is supremely bad at doing. We're bad at this because the very formation of our educational systems and of our knowledge systems is categoricalized. We like to break things down into categories, and then we know what we're talking about. If I tell you that I'm going to have a talk with you that's going to be about math, you know what I'm going to be doing. You expect numbers, you expect certain signifiers that are going to go along with that. You expect rules that are going to be there too. You expect certain experts who are going to have a lot more sway, for instance, than me when it comes to telling you to know about math. And you know that when we switch topics from math into ethics, that there's going to be a shift that involves all of those same things. If, however, we are to say that we're going to flow from category to category in the way that the Bible, again, a pre-modern document that doesn't do knowledge acquisition the way that we do, that doesn't do the education system the way that we do, you're going to find that it's going to break through a lot of those barriers. And you're going to find that the theological worldview of that is going to be schizophrenic to you. It's just not going to make any sense. So we have to undo a little bit, I think, in our own understanding this categoricalized way of thinking in order to see any discussion on sin for what it really is, which is a much broader thing. As an addendum to this, it's really interesting then why people have pointed out that so much of the most interesting theology of the last 100 more years has come from the global south and has come from Africa and has come from South America and has come from places that are not core to the Western world, but are peripheral to it, or maybe even from places that don't have a rigid Western tradition. I think this is one of the reasons why is there's so much more comfort in that flow through things and more of an understanding of the interrelatedness and interconnectedness that the wisdom of those traditions shows. That shows us that all things really are together and interrelated and pull upon one another. And you can't talk about sin as a distinct category without touching on all these other things as well. Okay, hope that was helpful. I'll see you all in church on Sunday, and we'll say none of the things that I just said because I didn't have to.